puts your mind
It takes you down and just levels
takes you
things
down
off.
to a level. Otherwise, you'd go out of here just, you couldn't sleep for,
Graceland had been keeping a secret for 47 long years. Nobody dared to touch it, nor ask about it. Then, one quiet morning, everything changed forever. What came out of that safe left Priscilla completely speechless. What was Elvis hiding? And why did it take 47 years for the truth to finally come out? The mansion that never slept. Graceland is a big, beautiful house in Memphis, Tennessee. It has tall white columns at the front and a wide green lawn that goes on and on. From the outside, it looks peaceful and still, like a place where nothing much happens anymore. But that feeling is not quite right, because Graceland still holds secrets, deep ones, the kind that have been waiting a very long time to come out. When Elvis Presley was alive, his home was never quiet. Music played all the time, people came and went at all hours, and laughter filled every room. Elvis loved having life happening all around him. Graceland was not just a house to him, it was his whole world, and he filled it with everything and everyone he cared about. But that was a long time ago. 47 years had passed since Elvis passed away, and the hallways that once rang with music had gone completely silent. Tourists walked through parts of the house every single day, but they only ever saw certain rooms. Other parts of Graceland stayed closed, stayed dark, stayed untouched. One of those untouched places had a safe inside it. Workers who had spent many years at Graceland would sometimes talk about a particular room in quiet voices. They all knew the same thing, that the room had always been off limits, that nobody went in there without special permission, and that this rule had never changed, not once, in all those years. People retired, new staff came in, the world outside kept moving forward, but that room stayed exactly the same. Nobody asked too many questions about it. It was the kind of thing that everyone understood without needing to be told. You just did not bring it up. The safe sat there year after year, locked and silent, while life went on around it. But after 47 years, people were starting to wonder. Why had nobody ever opened it? What was so important that it needed to stay hidden for almost half a century? The whispers had been growing slowly for a long time, and the answer was finally about to arrive. The key no one touched. August 16th, 1977, was one of the saddest days in music history. Elvis Presley passed away, and the whole world felt it. Fans gathered outside Graceland and cried. Radio stations stopped playing other songs and just played his. Flowers covered the long driveway from one end to the other. It was a moment that nobody who lived through it would ever forget. But while the world was grieving outside, something very different was happening inside the house. Lawyers walked through the rooms quickly, writing down everything they saw. Family members stood in corners and spoke to each other in low voices. Security guards blocked certain doorways and made sure nobody wandered into places they were not supposed to go. Some things inside Graceland were quietly sealed away. Not everything was meant to be seen by lawyers or strangers or the public. The people who were closest to Elvis understood this, and they worked fast to protect what needed protecting. Priscilla Presley had once been Elvis' wife. Even though the two of them had divorced before he passed away, she still cared deeply about him and about the way the world would remember him. In the days after his death, she stayed strong even when everything around her was falling apart. She made hard decisions calmly and carefully, and one of those decisions had to do with the safe. A story had been passed around quietly over the years, from one person to the next, that Elvis himself had once told someone he trusted never to open the safe after he was gone. Nobody could say for certain if this story was completely true or if it had grown bigger with time, but either way, the instruction had been followed. The safe stayed shut. Most people assumed that whatever was inside must have something to do with money or legal matters. But the people who actually knew about it always felt that the safe held something much more personal than that. Whatever was inside felt like it belonged to a quieter, softer side of Elvis, a side that had never been shown to the world, and a side that someone had been very careful to protect. The decision to finally open it. Nobody made a big announcement about it. There were no cameras, no reporters, no crowds waiting outside. The decision to open the safe after all those years happened in a very simple and quiet way, which is often how the most important things in life actually happen. Graceland had been going through some renovation work. People were carefully fixing and updating parts of the estate, trying to be respectful of its history, while also taking care of things that needed attention. It was during this process that the safe came back into everyone's thoughts, not because anyone went searching for it, but because the work being done nearby made it impossible to keep ignoring. A locksmith was called in without any fuss. The person arrived one morning carrying tools, ready to do a job. To the locksmith, it was just another safe that needed opening. But to everyone else standing in that room, it was something much bigger than that. Priscilla agreed to be there when the door was finally opened. She was older now, and she carried a kind of quiet peace that comes from living through many hard things. Agreeing to be present was not an easy choice for her. She had spent close to 5 decades carefully guarding certain parts of Elvis's private life, and opening this safe meant walking into territory she had kept protected for a very long time. But she felt ready, and so she said yes. Not a single reporter found out what was happening. No one tipped off the press or let anything slip. The whole thing was kept completely private, and everyone in that room wanted it to stay that way. As the locksmith got to work, the room became very still. Everyone standing there understood that something important was about to happen. Whatever had been sitting silently inside that safe for 47 years was finally going to come back into the world. Then the lock turned and the heavy door slowly swung open. The first envelope. Nobody in the room moved for a moment. They all just stood there, looking at what was inside the safe. After 47 years of wondering, the answer was right there in front of them, and it was both smaller and bigger than anyone had imagined. Inside the safe, there were neatly stacked documents. They were tied together carefully with a simple ribbon, the kind of ribbon that someone uses when they want to keep something together for a long time. The papers looked old, but they were in good condition, like someone had placed them there with great care and attention. Sitting right on top of everything else was an envelope. It was plain and white, a little yellow around the edges from all the years that had passed, and on the front of it, written in handwriting that several people in the room immediately recognized, was Priscilla's name. Someone handed it to her gently. She held it for a moment without opening it, just feeling the weight of it in her hands. Then, slowly, she opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. The letter was written by Elvis himself. It was long, and it was honest, and it was nothing like the image the world had always had of him. Elvis the performer was loud and confident and bigger than life itself, but the man who wrote this letter was something else entirely. He was quiet and uncertain and deeply human. He wrote about his fears. He wrote about how fame had slowly built a wall between him and the rest of the world, making it harder and harder to feel normal or real. He wrote about loneliness, the particular kind of loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people all the time, but still feeling completely alone inside. He wrote about regrets too, things he wished he had done differently, moments he wanted back, words he should have said sooner and did not. And somewhere near the end of the letter, in the final few lines, he wrote something so personal and so raw that Priscilla could not hold herself together anymore. She broke down completely, and the room stayed very quiet around her. The secret recording. After the letter was carefully folded and set aside, someone noticed something else sitting inside the safe. It was small and easy to miss at first glance, tucked carefully to one side like it had been placed there as an afterthought, even though it clearly had not been. Nothing inside that safe had been placed there by accident. It was a reel-to-reel tape, small, old, and slightly dusty. The kind of recording equipment that people used back in the 1970s before the world moved on to newer technology. And on the label, written in the same handwriting as the letter, were a few simple words in Elvis's own hand. This was not a music recording. That much became clear very quickly to everyone in the room. Elvis had made countless recordings in his life, songs that filled stadiums and broke records and made history, but this tape was not one of those. This one was something entirely different. This one was made for a very small audience, maybe even an audience of just one person. When the tape was carefully loaded and played, Elvis's voice filled the room. It was unmistakably him, but softer than anyone was used to hearing. He spoke slowly and thoughtfully, like a man who had been sitting alone for a long time and had finally decided to say the things he had been keeping inside. He talked about family, he talked about trust, how important it was to him, and how rare it was to find people who were truly loyal. He talked about certain relationships in his life, with a kind of sadness that was hard to listen to. Not naming everyone directly, but making it clear that something had hurt him deeply. There was a moment on the tape where he seemed to suggest that someone close to him, someone he had trusted completely, had not been fully honest with him. He did not say it loudly or with anger. He said it quietly, which somehow made it feel even heavier. Then the tape ended. Not slowly or gently, but abruptly. Mid-sentence almost. Like someone had simply stopped recording. The silence that followed felt enormous, and nobody in that room said a single word. The contract that changed everything. Once the tape had been switched off and the quiet had settled back into the room, people began carefully going through the rest of the documents that had been stacked so neatly inside the safe. Each page was handled gently, like something that might fall apart if touched too roughly, even though the papers had actually held up surprisingly well over all those decades. Near the bottom of the pile, someone pulled out a document that looked different from the others. It was longer, more formal. The kind of paperwork that lawyers and business people put together when something big is being decided. But this one had never been signed. The lines at the bottom where signatures should have gone were completely blank. It was a contract, or at least the beginning of one. And as people began reading through it carefully, the room shifted in a way that was hard to describe. Because what this document suggested was something that nobody had ever expected to find. Elvis had been planning to stop touring, not take a short break, not slow down for a few months, but actually stop. The contract hinted at a complete withdrawal from the kind of performing life that had defined him for more than 2 decades. The Las Vegas shows, the massive concert tours, the constant pressure of being on stage and being perfect and being the king every single night. He had apparently been thinking very seriously about walking away from all of it. There were mentions of relocation too, quiet and carefully worded, suggesting that Elvis had been thinking about leaving behind the places and the routines that had become so tightly wrapped around his public image. He wanted something smaller, something calmer, something that actually belonged to him and not to the legend. The contract had never been signed, which meant the plan had never been put into motion. But the fact that it existed at all said something enormous about the man who had written his name at the top of the page. Elvis Presley, the biggest star in the world, had been quietly dreaming of a completely different life, one where nobody was watching and nothing was expected and he could simply breathe. The photo. No one had seen tucked carefully inside a soft leather folder, right near the back of the safe where it would have been the last thing anyone reached for, was a photograph. It was printed on the kind of thick paper that old photos were made on, slightly faded around the edges, but still very clear in the middle where it mattered most. The photo showed Elvis, but not the Elvis that the world knew from album covers and concert posters and television screens. He was not performing, not smiling for the camera, not dressed in one of his famous stage outfits. He was just standing there in ordinary clothes, relaxed and calm, looking like a completely regular person. And standing beside him was someone that nobody in the room recognized. This was not a face that had ever appeared in any magazine or newspaper article about Elvis. It was not someone who had been mentioned in any of the many books written about his life. This person had never been publicly linked to Elvis Presley in any way. And yet, here they were, standing right beside him in a photograph that had been locked away so carefully for 47 years. On the back of the photo, someone had written a date. It was from early 1977, just months before Elvis passed away. That detail landed heavily on everyone in the room because it meant that this photograph had been taken at one of the hardest and most troubled periods of Elvis's life, when his health was struggling and the pressure around him was enormous. Who this person was remained a question without an easy answer, but the photograph made one thing very clear. There had been parts of Elvis's life that nobody had ever known about, and he had protected them very deliberately. The financial ledger. After the photograph was carefully placed back inside the leather folder, the group turned their attention to the remaining documents inside the safe. There were still a few pages that had not been looked at yet, sitting quietly at the bottom like they had been patiently waiting their turn. One of those pages turned out to be something that nobody had expected to find at all. It was a financial ledger, a long handwritten record of numbers and names and dates. The kind of careful note-taking that someone does when they'd want to keep track of something privately, without accountants or lawyers or anyone else involved. The handwriting was neat and deliberate, like whoever had written it had taken their time with every single entry. It was a record of giving. There were names listed, some of them ordinary names that meant nothing to anyone in the room. people from small towns and quiet neighborhoods that had no obvious connection to the world of music or celebrity. Next to each name was a number, and next to each number was a short note explaining what the money had been used for. Medical bills paid for strangers who could not afford treatment. School fees covered for children whose families had nothing. Rent paid quietly for people who were about to lose their homes. None of it had ever been made public. There were no press releases attached to any of these donations, no photographs of Elvis handing over a check with a big smile for the cameras, no stories in the newspapers about his generosity. Every single entry in that ledger represented something that had been done in complete and total silence. Priscilla stood very still as she read through the pages. She had known Elvis better than almost anyone alive, had shared years of her life with him, had seen sides of him that the rest of the world never got to see. But even she had not known about this. Even she had been unaware of just how much he had been quietly giving away while the world watched him perform and assumed they understood who he really was. The ledger went back many years, entry after entry, name after name, amount after amount. It painted a picture of a man who had felt a deep and genuine responsibility toward ordinary people, toward strangers who needed help and had nowhere else to turn. He had not done it for recognition. He had not done it to improve his image or win admiration. He had done it because something inside him simply could not look away from suffering when he saw it. By the time the last page had been turned, the room was completely silent again. Priscilla looked up from the final page with tears still in her eyes, but something in her expression had changed. The sadness was still there, but underneath it something else had arrived, something that looked very much like pride. A father's promise. Near the very bottom of the safe, almost hidden beneath everything else that had already been discovered, someone spotted a small object that had nothing to do with papers or documents or recordings. It was a box, tiny and neat, covered in dark velvet that had faded slightly with age but still held its shape. The kind of box that is made to hold something delicate and precious inside. Someone lifted it out carefully and placed it on the table. For a moment, nobody opened it. After everything that had already been found that day, there was a certain carefulness that had settled over the whole room. A shared understanding that each new thing deserved its own moment before being rushed into. Then the box was opened, and inside, resting on a small cushion of aged white fabric, was a pendant. It was beautiful in a quiet and simple way. Not flashy or oversized, just a carefully made piece of jewelry that looked like it had been chosen with a great deal of thought. It was the kind of thing someone picks not to impress anyone, but because it feels right, because it matches something true about the person it is meant for. Underneath the pendant, folded into a very small square and tucked neatly beneath the cushion, was a note. It was short, only a few lines long, but every single word of it carried enormous weight. The note was written to Lisa Marie Presley, Elvis's only child, the little girl who had grown up inside Graceland surrounded by music and cameras, and a father who was also somehow the most famous person in the world. The note spoke about protection. It spoke about legacy, about the things Elvis wanted to leave behind for his daughter that had nothing to do with money or property or the business side of his enormous estate. He wrote about wanting her to always know that she had been the most real and most important part of his life. More real than the stage, more important than the fame, more lasting than any song he had ever recorded. He wrote that he was sorry for the times when the world had pulled him away from her. He wrote that he had not always known how to be present in the way a father should be, and that this had sat heavily on him for a very long time. But he wanted her to know, in words that could not be taken away or misunderstood, that she had always been protected in his heart even when he had not been there in person. Lisa Marie Presley had passed away in January of 2023, and that fact made the note almost unbearable to think about. A message written by a father for his daughter, sitting untouched in a safe for 47 years, and the daughter never got to read it. The pendant never reached the hands it had been chosen for. Priscilla had to sit down. The tears that had started with the letter in chapter 4 had never really stopped. But this moment brought something deeper and more painful than anything else that had come before it. This was not about Elvis the legend or Elvis the performer or even Elvis the complicated and troubled man. This was simply about a father who had loved his little girl and had not found the right way to show it while he was still alive. The room stayed quiet for a long time after that. Why it stayed hidden for 47 years. By the time everything had been looked at, one question had been forming slowly in the back of everyone's mind. It had been there from the very beginning, waiting patiently behind all the emotions and discoveries. And now, it finally needed a proper answer. Why had the safe stayed locked for 47 years? The easy answer was legal pressure. Elvis's estate had been complicated from the start, wrapped up in contracts and court matters that took years to untangle. In situations like that, things get set aside, rooms get overlooked, and time moves faster than anyone expects. But that was not the complete answer. The safe had not been forgotten. It had been deliberately left alone, and the person who made that decision was Priscilla. She had carried this quietly for nearly 5 decades. While the world debated Elvis' legacy and journalists wrote their stories, Priscilla had been sitting with the truth in a way nobody else had been allowed to. She had known what the safe contained, and she had chosen again and again across all those years to leave it untouched. Some of that decision came from the legal battles that surrounded the estate in the early years. Opening the safe at the wrong time could have made painful things even more complicated. But the deeper reason was far more personal. Priscilla had understood something important about the man she had loved. Elvis, the human being, had spent his whole adult life being swallowed by Elvis the legend. Every room he entered, every relationship he tried to build had been overshadowed by who the world needed him to be. The safe had been his one private corner, a place where the legend could not reach him. Priscilla had protected that corner because she understood that some things matter more than satisfying the world's curiosity. She had not been hiding shame. She had been protecting something gentle and real because the man inside the legend had quietly asked her to. The tears that said, everything. When everything inside the safe had been looked at and the room had finally gone still, Priscilla stood up slowly. She did not say anything for a long moment. She just stood there, holding herself together with a kind of quiet strength that comes from a lifetime of practice, breathing steadily while everything inside her was anything but steady. Then she walked out of the room. Nobody followed her right away. Everyone understood, without being told that she needed a moment that belonged only to her, a moment with no audience and no cameras and no one watching her face trying to read what she was feeling. She had given enough of herself to the world over the decades. This moment was hers alone. Outside the room, away from the safe and the documents and the pendant and the tape, Priscilla finally let go. The tears that came were not the loud and dramatic kind. They were quiet and deep, the kind that come from a place that has been closed off for a very long time and has only just been allowed to open. In 1977, when Elvis passed away, everything had moved so fast. There had been no time to grieve properly, no space to sit with the loss in a private and personal way. The world had needed things from her immediately, decisions and appearances and strength, and she had given all of those things without hesitation. But inside that safe had been something she never got in those terrible first days after his death. A goodbye, not a public one, not a formal one, but a real one, written in his own hand and kept safe just for her. 47 years later, she finally received it, and the tears that fell said everything that words simply could not. The legacy rewritten in history has a habit of remembering people in one particular way and then refusing to look any further. Elvis Presley had been remembered as the king of rock and roll, the man with the voice and the hips and the jumpsuits and the sold-out shows. That version of him was real, but it was never the whole picture. What the safe revealed was the rest of the picture. The man who wrote honest letters and made private recordings and kept a ledger full of secret kindnesses. The man who had dreamed of a simpler life and never got the chance to live it. None of those things canceled out the complicated parts of his story. Elvis had struggled deeply with many things during his life, and those struggles were real and well documented. But the safe added something important to the story that had been missing for a very long time. It added tenderness. It added self-awareness. It added a human being behind the legend. Priscilla had carried the weight of this for 47 years, protecting a version of Elvis that the world had never been ready to receive. Now, finally, it had been received. The safe was closed again after everything was carefully documented and preserved. It sat quietly in the room where it had always been. No longer a mystery, but now something closer to a monument. A small and solid reminder that the people history turns into legends are always, underneath everything, just people. And somewhere beyond the noise and the fame and the decades of stories told and retold, the real Elvis Presley had been waiting patiently in that safe all along, hoping that someone would eventually open the door, and someone finally did.